Hi, everybody. This is Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal, and welcome to today's SEJ show. Today, I have Shelly Fagin of Credit Karma, who I'm really happy to have on to share all kinds of stuff about WordPress. How's it going, Shelly?
It's going pretty good, Lauren. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining. So, we've had the chance to actually present in the past at the WP Engine. What was it called? Was it Decode?
Decode. Yes.
Decode online. That was actually one of the first online conferences I've ever done. And they did
Right.
it, that was like pre-COVID, and they did it
It
very
was
well.
pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. They even stepped it up a notch the second year that they did it, and just totally impressed. Good,
Yeah.
good, good content for sure.
There was a couple of things I liked about that conference that I always bring up, especially at SEJ when we did our e-summits. And I like the fact that they sent a Decode t-shirt to all people that were presenting ahead of time. That way
Right.
there was like some uniformity in how we, like, people may have had different backgrounds or whatever, but at least we all had the WP Engine and shirt on. And I still wear that shirt all the time. It's super
I do
comfy.
too. It is really
Yeah.
cute. So that was so the second year that they did it, in 2020, or maybe it was earlier this year. I can't quite remember. But they actually sent us all green screens. They sent us cameras. They sent us
Oh,
lights.
wow.
I got another Decoded t-shirt. So yeah, they took it a step up this year in order to make everyone's backgrounds look uniform. They hired a production company and they cut, like, it was totally well done. Very, very well done. So I was impressed.
Yeah.
I will do it
It's
again every year.
awesome. Awesome. So today, and one reason I invited Shelly on the show was I wanted to kind of, last week we had Syed Balki on from Awesome Motive, who they have like Monster Insights, Opt-in Monster, all-in-one SEO, and lots of plugins underneath their suite. So figured why not make it a WordPress month, I guess, so going into November. So Shelly, I've had the privilege to present with and work with in the past. And one thing I've always been amazed with was your ability to adapt WordPress ecosystems to enterprise, right? Because I think a lot of people, when they think of WordPress, they think of just the open source WordPress project, the ability to use WordPress on an easy to set up blog, et cetera, et cetera. And then
Right.
sometimes with a lot of enterprise companies that I talk to, they're like, oh, no, we're not going to use WordPress. We're going to use Embraco, or we're going to use this, or we're going to use this really difficult to figure out CMS system that no one else,
We got to build our own.
we have to build our own. So, Shelly, you're at Credit Karma now.
Mhm.
You have a big history of utilizing WordPress on the enterprise side. We'll get into that in a second. But first, could you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about your background, what your specialties are, you specialize in, and then a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So really, it's my journey kind of started about, I'm going to date myself, but we are at 20 years now.
Whoa.
I know I was expecting my first child, and just really determined to be able to work from home, and started just digging in, learning how to build websites. And that's really how I started, was more front end stuff. And I wouldn't even say that, because when I was self-teaching, there was not a lot of resources available. So it was mostly,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what CMSs can we work with? And I think I started originally with like .NET Nuke or something like something like that on the
Yeah.
.NET
Awesome.
side. And then, quickly started to learn about ranking in search engines, and became fascinated with that. And I'm like, oh crap, I actually have to really learn how to code. And so taught myself more, just build out static sites. Absolutely did that for a really long time, hand coded. Some of my first SEO clients, their sites ran for years off of just static HTML pages, and they ranked very, very well. But then, grew the world of needs for a more dynamic site, and blogs, and that's kind of where I became introduced to WordPress.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably would say I've been using WordPress for maybe 13 rough years or so. One of my first clients was a lawyer, and we put him on WordPress for his legal blog. But I've been fascinated with it ever since. And I eventually, I'd worked with a lot of different CMSs over the years, but WordPress kind of captured my attention, and I knew that it had the flexibility. It also had the community, which was huge because I was learning as I was going. And so that was really, really important to me. I spent my years actually for, let's say the last like 12 or 13 years, doing kind of 50-50 front end web development, mostly on WordPress
Mhm.
and for my clients, and then also then monthly SEO. So I consider myself more of a technical SEO. I kind of geek out over techie stuff. And then, I really love getting in when I do work with bigger teams, being able to just huddle and chat with the developers and help them understand a little bit more about SEO. And I've always been like, I've always loved that side of it where a lot of SEOs feel like they bang their heads against the wall dealing with developers and big teams. I've always loved that. Um, and so after years and years of just working as an independent consultant and working with all kinds of different clients and niches, I got the chance to go in-house and work with, I've been with two different enterprise brands, and they both run off of WordPress. So it's been a lot of fun. I don't know. My last job before I came to Credit Karma was with Cox Enterprises, Cox Automotive, actually specifically Kelly Blue Book and Auto Trader um, sites, and I was actually a senior SEO product manager. Loved what I did there, working directly with the dev team in house, managing WordPress, and that was a fantastic experience. Absolutely loved that. So, and then I got stolen away and went to Credit Karma. But I still get to work with WordPress. It's a little bit different over here. So every company kind of does it a little bit differently. So
And you're not the
exciting. Yeah.
person responsible for sending
I am
5
not.
emails a day from Credit Karma,
I am
right?
not. So I'm a
Okay, good.
director at Credit Karma, a director of SEO, and I do have a really great team.
Mhm.
We actually don't fully manage our WordPress in-house, but we work with a third-party vendor. And then we do have a team that manages our CMS. They just don't handle the dev work. So ours
Right.
is kind of organized a little bit differently. Than how we had it at Cox Automotive. So I don't know.
Amazing.
And we'll have to see what the future holds. Who knows?
So I have a couple questions, but before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors today,
Yes.
Adzuma and SEMrush. So
Woohoo.
thanks to Adzuma and SEMrush, we got all PPC and SEO covered here. So they're the ones that make the SEJ show doable and pay the bills. So thank you so much to our sponsors. And Shelly, one thing that you brought up was SEOs banging their head against a wall with developers, right? So this is an ongoing conversation in the world of SEO. Is like I can put together this audit and I know it needs to be fixed, but then it's like how to work with developers to fix it. So before we get started talking about like WordPress and everything else, what are some tips that you have with building trust with development teams? And not like the old, like I always hear people like, oh, take them out for a beer or something like that. Like, no, I'm not sure that actually works. But what are some tips that you have with building trust from the get-go to make sure that you can actually get movement or get in, just get some
Get
updates
stuff done.
in, right? Yeah.
Right. So that's a good one. I really think having the ability to be a really good listener. Um, your dev team needs to feel heard when they're stressed or they have anxiety or they don't understand. Um, don't just shout orders their way and say, okay, I need this done. I really think it's important to take the time to explain to them why it's important. I have worked with some really incredible dev teams. As long as you have people that are open, I mean, they should be, if they're working on developing a site that is on the web that needs to rank, they should care about SEO. And so it's kind of our job to explain to them how they can modify the way that they're doing things to help drive traffic. And it's just job security
Mhm.
for them. Any growth in the company is
Ooh.
going to give them more resources and whatnot, and job security. So I think most part they're really willing to be cooperative and to learn. You just have to have the patience to explain to them. And then the other thing that I really think is important is to really celebrate your wins and successes. So a lot of times
Mm.
they put in these changes and their tickets, and they, releases and all of that, and then they have no idea what happens from it. And so we're here celebrating, with the marketing team or the C-suite, but no one on the dev side has no idea the impacts that their work is actually doing. So I think that is critical, to be able to share those wins and show the lifts and be like, oh my goodness, see how you did this here, and look at this lift in this chart. They get really excited, and then they start really wanting to know more, and they learn. And it's not like you have to hold their hand all the time. Like, they are brilliant developers on these teams. They learn really quick and they just become sponges. So eventually you'll have a super powerful team, and they'll be willing and ready to accept, and fit in anything that you say is a priority, ahead of something else. So that's always kind of been what works with me. And understand that they're going to have other priorities too, and not become the biggest, like, meanest person when they're like, well, we have executives that need to have this done, and sometimes there's just other priorities. So just
Yeah,
being
you bring up some you bring up some really good points. First of all, like, I think empathy is like a big thing, right? Like, there's so many consultants, they're like, oh, devs won't do anything. Yeah, let's force, like, it's not a force thing, right?
no.
It's like, I learned this when I had those client I was working with, and basically, like, the in-house person's like, look, just put all these tickets in yourself. And then they put me into like the development Reich space or something. And then, like, I see everything that they're working on, everything else that they're working on. And everything else that they're working on had the same, if not a higher priority than what we were working on from the SEO side. Because they're not just working on like fixes to the site or adding this tag or changing this from a rendering perspective or deferring this script. They're working on everything from like a landing page perspective for a campaign that's launching that weekend. They're working on things that are part of maybe a TV campaign that have a video sales page set up for that. They're working on all kinds of things for all kinds of different departments within marketing, tech, education, communications,
Right.
everything else within the company that all has very similar priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was really eye-opening for me, because I'm like, oh my God, these aren't just like a bunch of dudes sitting in the basement like with nothing to do all day, like playing video games. They're actually really, really busy, and they're a lot more in tune to the entire company's heartbeat as a whole than a lot of people give them credit for, right?
Oh,
So just
100%.
the ability to go in and see that was incredibly eye-opening for me. And then also, I think what you said in terms of communicating wins, like, I have some enterprise clients that I work with right now, and um, sometimes it can be frustrating because you'll send over things hoping that they get implemented, and it takes a long time, right?
Right.
And then like sometimes like 20% or 30% is implemented, right? But sometimes a 20 to 30% can be a win, and it can get lift. And I know, like, for me, I'll get upset if I see, like, I won't get that excited to see like a 3%, 4% uptick in traffic or something like that, right? But then when I explain that happened to some people internally, they're like, that's fantastic. We have to communicate this up the ladder right now. And then suddenly I realize that I hold myself to like these, I don't know, I hold myself to these expectations that we have like on the SEJ side, where we can just make a change and all of a sudden it goes to the roof. And once you're able to communicate that, like, hey, listen, we prioritize this list. You were able to implement 3 out of 10. Here are the results we got out of 3 out of 10. Here are the rest from a prioritized standpoint based upon what you can implement, based upon the timelines that you gave to us.
Right.
If we can get this together, then we may be able to get much more. And congratulations on what you've been able to obtain thus far. It goes a lot farther than, hey, you only got 3 out of 10 implemented. What's going on with you? Right. So
yeah, that is exactly true. It makes such a huge difference. And, especially in an enterprise world, but I think even it's applicable to any size of business. We need a kind of a business case behind what we're doing. And we should have data to be able to kind of show what happens when we see a lift in a certain area. So we should be able to say, this is what you have to gain, and this is what you're currently losing by not implementing this. And if they start to do that with different things, then it allows them to give priorities based off of, from a financial standpoint, which ultimately I think a lot of people speak money, dollars and cents. So it'll go a long way, if you, tell them, look, this is a priority over this. I get it. But by not doing this every single day, we are losing this amount and is going to our competitor. And that usually does, that's usually a good one to get those features in. So.
And I think that also goes back to like understanding company KPIs at the end of the day too, right? And goals. Like, so I've been on calls or like walkthroughs where I'm like showing someone their Search Console data, right? And, light blue is clicks, dark blue is impressions, right? So they'll see the clicks and then maybe there'll be a slight increase and they're like, oh, that's nice. But what's this dark blue line that's going through the roof? I'd be like, yeah, that's just impressions. Like, that just means that like maybe you're on page 1, but you're at the bottom, so you're not getting all the clicks. And they're like, wow, we got so many more impressions. We have 120% uptick in impressions over the previous quarter. I'm like, yeah, but that's, and they're like, that means that we have a huge increase in share of voice. So it's just like trying to get an idea of what we hold to be like success metrics versus what the client does. Cause there can be some, I guess, micro success metrics along the way. Cause we tend to think of like traffic and conversions as being the bottom line for everything. But it's not always, right?
It is not always. And that's a really good point. And that's how like a lot of our, like the PR team is more based off of, share of voice. So you're right. Like, especially when you're building a brand, impressions do matter. So it's to celebrate those wins. Yes, we want to see it actually turn into clicks. But I always say, it's optimistic that we're moving in the right direction. But yeah, you're right. KPIs, they have their different goals and what matters to them. We actually just went through our first quarterly, kind of goal planning ourselves, and it was a lot of fun. Every team, has different objectives, and then you also got to pull in all the different stakeholders and make sure you get alignment across the teams. And at an enterprise level, that's big. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of teamwork, and especially when you're at enterprise and they're app driven. A lot of times the apps where all the money's made. So a lot of times if you're working in an unauth, type of world, it's hard to take resources away from that, the app side of things. So it's you got to coordinate and be understanding of different teams and be flexible, but then also know how to prioritize. And because everything you push forward basically means that there's something else that can't be done usually in its place. So have to make sure we understand the priorities of the teams and all the stakeholders and have an alignment. So it's not always easy to do. I'm learning every day. It's been a lot of fun, actually.
So what would you say are some common myths around WordPress that could be seen as inaccurate? Like, what do you hear sometimes? Like, oh, we can't ever use WordPress, or maybe people assume that you can, and it's like a magic pill, right? So,
right.
What's some WordPress myth busting from Shelly Fagin?
Good one. Okay, yeah. So One probably would be, WordPress is just SEO friendly out of the box. We just have to go and install Yoast and we're good to go. And, I'd say it's a good start. But WordPress is really only as great as what you put on top of it. So, your theme is really, really important. I know we're kind of like moving away from themes, but still your foundation um,
Mm-hmm.
is very, very important. Your site structure, I think it's like so overlooked at the organization and the site information architecture, um, that especially at an enterprise level over the years, they become like a hot mess. And we really want to make sure that that is all in place. I love breadcrumbs for a usability standpoint. I think they're great for SEO. And if you don't have a good information architecture and site structure, those breadcrumbs are so not logical.
Right.
And they're annoying for the user. I truly believe also from, a content funneling standpoint, it just from a classification that it's important to have your site structure down correctly. And if you're starting a new site, it's the best time to get it right. But it's never too late to go back and fix it. You always have to play a lot of cautious depending on how like your permalinks are set up.
Mm-hmm.
If they are, if your categories play a role in your permalinks, then obviously going in and doing an overhaul of your category structure could be disastrous if it's not done right. It might not be worth changing at all. It might, just require a lot of work by some very smart people that understand that side of things. So it definitely is overlooked. The other thing is just I think, you have to take the time to optimize your pages yourself. Even you turn on Yoast and by default, your category pages, their title tags is like category archive. So like
Yeah.
say your food blog, it might be like dinner archive. Like no one
Right.
searches like that. So you do have to go in and take the time to customize these pages. Write custom titles, write descriptions. The other thing is to utilize Schema as well. So, a lot of like Yoast actually has a lot of built-in Schema features, but are you utilizing them as well? So there's a lot of stuff to be done. Site speed, as we know, is huge. Core Web Vitals is huge, very important. So we need to be careful of the plugins and the things that we are loading and how our framework and our code, operates and functions. We also have to pay attention to the images that we're uploading onto the pages. A huge image
Mm-hmm.
will just tank your site speed like nothing else. So, it's not out of the box, but it's a very solid foundation, but you do kind of got to know what you're doing, I think, or at least working with someone, to get it solid. Um, I don't know. So, see, another SEO myth I think would be huge is, a lot of people I think still think that, oh, WordPress is for blogs or
Yeah.
media. Yeah, it's like, and granted, it started out that way. WordPress is a incredible like platform. The CMS is meant for just about everything. It is so flexible. And I've had the chance, I've done some pretty cool stuff for just different clients. But then when we got to the enterprise level, experiencing, headless CMS and decoupling and, working with developers to build these really fantastic like React front ends, but still giving the control of the content, putting it into the hands of less tech people.
Mm-hmm.
Because who wants to have to put in a ticket every time you need a paragraph changed? Like that's just
Exactly.
not scalable. It really is not. So any piece of content, any creative things that needs to be frequently changed out, um, teams that frequently put out new campaigns and they need to create landing pages on the fly, they need to have access to a system that will allow them to do that. And WordPress really truly is that. And I think a lot of people, one of the other myths is a lot of people were turned off when Gutenberg first rolled out. change I think is hard for anyone. But I know, it was buggy, in the beginning, and a lot of people tested it out and then they were scared off and they just refused
Hmm.
to try it again. And I will tell you that you are missing out. It has improved tremendously over the last couple of years. We are at a point where full site editing is here. It will just continue to become even more and more utilized. Um, we I've seen some of the coolest templates with blocks being utilized at the enterprise level, allowing your teams with no technical experience to be able to roll out custom looking pages that are fully optimized in a flash. And like
Wow.
for enterprise to be able to scale like that and be able to move fast and not have to wait till the next sprint, or couple sprints down the road, or oh, let's get it into our next quarterly KPIs, and that's just not scalable. We need to
Yeah.
be able to get in there and move quick and still put out that quality that is expected out of the brands that you built. So I know
And
it's
I would
exciting.
imagine that agility can be an advantage at the end of the day, especially if your main competitors are not that agile, right? They're not
Right.
that quick to make those changes. So
That's 100% true. It's time to get ahead of the curve.
I agree with you on the Gutenberg side. One of the first things I did was I got one of those like classic WordPress plugins and started using it because I'm like, I'm not changing. This is not going to stick around. And then logged into it the other day, and I was on a blog that was not set up with the classic things, and I was enjoying it. Like really, like it's a pretty nice setup at the end of the day,
It, it
So
really truly is, and especially for those who have a less technical background.
mhm.
I Before I started working in house, I helped a lot of bloggers convert their blogs over. I forced them into the block editor. A couple went in kicking and screaming, but usually within a week, I would get an email like, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I do this sooner? This is so much easier, so much more intuitive." It's just they don't have to fight styles that are getting pulled in from some crazy place, and they just have so much more control. And that's really the cool thing as well. It's I was working. I'm a huge fan. I've always used Genesis for a really long time.
Mhm.
They were bought out obviously by WordPress Engine, and WordPress Engine has put out some incredible tools for the block editor with their Genesis blocks and their Genesis Block Pro. I love utilizing them. You can build custom styled blocks, and you can do permissions so granular so that you can kind of like give people the access to use them that need them without them being able to mess up things. Um, which is really, really important.
Mhm.
And what's really cool is, we have a lot of custom pages, but, in the old days, you'd really have to load those styles site wide. And now we know from a page speed perspective, we don't want to do that. We want to keep styles that are very specific on just one or two pages, only loading on those pages. And so that's the coolest thing about some of these custom blocks, that they're built right. The CSS and the styling for those things are just going to get injected into that page. So it'll help you with your page load times across the rest of the site, and kind of your critical CSS type of loading as well. So there's a lot of cool functionality. It's only going to get better, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Likewise. Now, what about security? Sometimes I hear people saying that WordPress isn't secure
Right.
as other enterprise CMS solutions.
Right.
So,
So that's not true. I think WordPress, I'm trying to remember what the market share is now. It's so huge. It keeps going up. I can't even, you know, keep track of where it's at, but it's definitely the lion's share of all CMSs out there. So it becomes the most targeted. It's just plain and simple. It's also open source. A lot of the plugins are open source, which means they're free, which, obviously if the developers that are building these plugins and putting them out, if they don't fully understand security and they don't stay on top of like latest things, then they can quickly become vulnerability points.
yeah.
So that's, important that when you're using third party plugins, to have a really good understanding of who built them?
Mm-hmm.
What is their team like? Are they constantly updating this? Are they on top of, updates? Are they pushing out updates even before WordPress rolls out updates because they're testing them ahead of time? You really want to make sure there's, every plugin, if it's been around for a while, it probably has had a few hiccups
Mm-hmm.
over the years, but it's that security, the people knowing that they have a team that's active and responsive
Right.
when something does happen. um, you know Plugins and vendors that work directly with WordPress core itself is obviously probably a good way to go. They're integrated with WordPress at the core and automatic, and that is really truly important. um, I would at the enterprise level, we run off of WordPress VIP.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously not for the little guy, but WordPress VIP, we really don't even have to worry about. Um, Security that is totally handled by WordPress itself or automatic. And, we go through all the development, all the plugins, anything that gets put through goes through a QA process and approval and gets into a testing environment and staging and then pushed to production. And it goes through an approval and even goes through approval on the VIP side. And so, nothing gets through that hasn't passed major security checks, usually when you're at the enterprise level. But when you're a smaller company that doesn't have a huge team like that, then I think, it's important to find a really good web host and
Mm-hmm.
to do research diligently. Don't mind my contact. Do some diligent research about every single plugin that you install. Just because it's on the WordPress.org directory, or it doesn't mean it's a
Yeah.
good one too.
I agree. I agree. For a number of reasons. One being not only, I mean, not only security, but there are companies that will go up and they'll buy abandoned plugins or expired plugins and things like that. And then sometimes they'll do things like link insertions through them
Mm,
and stuff that can even hurt you from an SEO side. I mean, it can maybe help you from an SEO side if you're on the other side of that, but it can definitely hurt you long term from an SEO side as well. So
right.
if you see a plugin that looks really cool and it hasn't been updated in a couple of years, like read the reviews. A lot of the reviews that I see on not only just like the WordPress plugin marketplace, I guess, but also like this Shopify app marketplace, is a lot of the reviews are customer service oriented,
Right.
right? And like definitely take the time to go through those because they'll be like, hey, these guys get back to me almost immediately. Or it'll be like, I haven't heard back from them ever. And there's all these issues and stuff. Just, best to stay away from that. I like your point about making sure that the plugin companies are pretty tuned in to the whole WordPress world and not just building things and moving on to build something else. And then suddenly you're stuck with something that may take down your site one weekend.
Right.
I have a couple questions that are coming through and some comments.
Oh, sure.
So one question that came through is,
Oh, wow. I've been
Alex
missing the comments the
says,
whole
yeah,
time.
Alex says, yeah, Arson and Dave Brown are lighting this thing up. But one comment or question is that they've heard that Alex says they know there's huge competition between Wix and WordPress. And how do you see this? And how do you compare the two platforms?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
is there really competition between Wix and WordPress at the end of the day, or
I don't think there's a
is that a
competition.
Wix? Yeah, it's a Wix thing. Wix says there is.
I know they do.
Maybe not WordPress. Yeah.
And they sent me some really nice headphones that I still totally love and
Uh-huh.
appreciate every
When
single day.
Morty was there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I feel like Wix is a great platform for a certain type of customer.
Mm-hmm.
And can be utilized, very quick. They have beautiful designs and I think they have a purpose. And I'm excited to see what they do in the future because I'm sure, like, just some of the people that they've had on board, I guarantee they've had some fantastic input into growth, especially from an SEO standpoint. For most of the types of companies that I've always worked with, we've steered away from a platform like Wix. And I'll be honest, I haven't actually used it hardly. I played around with a couple sites. I've helped migrate some Wix customers over to WordPress. But for
Mhm.
me, it was always because having that lack of control. Um,
Yeah.
I I want to be able to fine tune like the servers that my site is hosted on so that I can make the site as fast as possible. I want to be able to get into the code and optimize in places that you just can't with something like Wix and even Shopify. You're a little restricted. I think Shopify is
Mhm.
is actually I like Shopify quite a bit. And they have a fantastic team as well. So for e-commerce, fantastic. I still tend to love WooCommerce just because of that extendability. I really do love
Right.
having control and of just about everything. So
Yeah, I agree with you on the Wix side. I think if you're a small business, you don't want to go through setting up a hosting account over here and then developing on the WordPress side here and trying to manage all of that and manage the DNSs and everything else, which to us may sound like it's normal, but for someone else, they're like, why do I have to do that's why like businesses will sign up, they'll use GoDaddy or they'll use
right.
Squarespace or they'll use Wix because it's just so much easier at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
If you're not a developer or half of a developer like I might be, then it can be really overwhelming. And I do also think, I'm gonna sound like a broken record because I brought this up last week too, is I do also think that WordPress.com has all of that within its offering, but does not do a very good job of communicating that. And maybe they don't want to, right? Maybe WordPress.com is not they don't want every restaurant or
Yeah.
bakery or whatever, plumber or whatever signing up for an account there. Maybe they have different goals, So I think Wix and Squarespace and some others have really done a good job of cornering that market. And, maybe once you get to the point where you can grow more, it makes sense to do that transfer. But yeah,
Right.
I'm not going
I
to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just totally agree with you.
And then I do agree on the Shopify side. I'm really impressed with everything that Shopify has been doing over the past 6 months or so. So seeing
Yes.
that grow is really cool. Other questions and comments that have come through. I want to learn about how important is Schema to you and the projects that you're working on, especially within a WordPress environment, enterprise environment. Is it an end all be all? Do you really need it at the end of the day?
I do. I love Schema. It is complicated for some people, but I really think they overcomplicate it. Schema is a way for us to directly tell all these different search engines exactly what our content and our pages are about. And not only that, we can optimize for some really cool, rich features in the SERPs. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the cool things, like for instance, that we started doing earlier this year when I was at Cox, we started integrating FAQ schema. We have this fantastic content, and we even had these questions already, on these
In the
posts.
content itself,
In the
yeah.
content, yes, it was already there. So going back in and adding the FAQ with the schema, you would not believe the clicks now. And the what's really cool is it beefs up your SERP. You get those special little drop downs before your SERP on those pages, and people love clicking on them. And it gets them in deeper into your content. That's really like such an easy big win that it's a no-brainer. And that's one of the things that I like about Yoast is, it has the blocks. If you're using the block editor, you can use the Yoast blocks for FAQs and
Mm.
for Q&A, I believe, or the how-to.
Oh
So
yeah.
those are really great. Yeah. So I love that. But I'm even like, if you have a medical practice and you have bio
Mm-hmm.
pages for your doctors, you should be utilizing schema that's appropriate for those pages as well and mark up as much information as you have about that doctor. We're in an eat world. So as
Yes.
they say, so yeah, we utilize it where you can. Don't underestimate it. It really can't hurt, and that's the thing. Who knows how long it'll be as effective as it is, but can't hurt. Only
Awesome.
help.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent, like, especially, I mean, we've done a lot with FAQ schema on SEJ, right? And to your point, a lot of those questions and answers are in the content already.
Right.
So it's just a question of like marking it up, identifying it and
Right.
marking it up. Then how-tos, of course, author credentials. And I kind of like playing around with schema, like just making stuff up to see how it works
If it
or
works.
not. Because yeah, it does give you the ability to do so to an extent. So that's always fun. Do you think SEOs should be learning the ins and outs of WordPress a little bit more, and to that extent, other CMS solutions, like
Right.
especially if you're working on the sites that are powered by them?
I totally agree. So I think I was lucky in that my original foundation was just, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, things like that. So I learned the standard of front end development, which always translated well across, multiple CMSs.
Mhm.
But I always had just a fondness for WordPress. But I would tell you that learning still, I think the basics of learning how to build and code static pages will suit you really well in WordPress, so you can have that flexibility across multiple CMS types. The big part is just being able to recognize, because a lot of times I have to go in and I have to diagnose like what is going on, and you got to figure out how these pages get built. And it's different.
Yeah.
Every CMS is different, but even that every site is different, because you don't know what that development team, they're all a little extendable and customizable. And even on the Shopify side, it's like however that developer did it might not be how the next developer does it. And so there's a learning curve. And so understanding that with that foundation of how those themes and the templates and the CMSs work and generate allows you to pinpoint exactly where to go to fix things when you realize something's wrong. So for one, second thing that I would love to say is that I feel like there really is a huge shortage in SEOs that specialize in WordPress. And there's a huge opportunity. I can't shout this loud enough. I did not realize just how much need there was and lack of, there's a lot of SEOs that, yes, they know how to go into WordPress and do some different things and change some settings and whatnot, but really understanding how they're coded and how the themes are pulled together and how stuff gets displayed and where this code comes from and how it gets adjusted. There is a huge need for that. And I've learned, like at Cox, I got really lucky working with the product team and, being able to talk to developers and understand what they're doing and what they're implementing, but then also having that strong technical, especially SEO foundation. If you're interested in both of these things, please explore and get experience as much as you can. There's so many really great brands and companies that need you. I know, like when I left Cox to come to from Kelly Blue Book and Auto Trader to come to Credit Karma, it's not easy to find a replacement that specialized and did kind of what I did over there. So I've been like trying to keep an ear to the ground, but usually a lot of the people that have that development background, they work on the development side or they work on the SEO side, and they're not really doing both. But I think there's a massive opportunity for it. A lot of brands will go probably eventually will build their own in-house dev teams. And so I love product management. I think I think that's how we should be doing SEO, running our SEO in an agile environment, but working with teams as well that operates that way, having that foundation. I just can't tell you how big the job opportunities are. It excites me. There's a shortage. So I really hope people that are interested will kind of go down that path and explore, and reach out to me if you want like some guidance or ideas.
I really think that's great advice for a couple of reasons. One, I see very little value in like an SEO audit. That's just a list of things that don't work or things that
Right.
are broken, right? So do devs, because you can hand them like, here's 600 links that are 301 redirecting, right? But why? And
Right.
what are the specific fixes? Are they
How do I fix
redirecting?
it? Right.
Exactly. Oh, because you're utilizing, subfolder shortener in your quick links and this template that's on this section of the site and not the others. So it's generating 404 because of that. Oh, I see. Okay, now I'll fix it.
Yes.
Or you're on this hosting environment and you missed a trailing slash in the URLs and the navigation, and the host is going to automatically redirect you to the proper URL with the trailing slash. Oh, that makes sense. But if
Right.
you're just giving a spreadsheet export of every issue and not defining why or what the fixes are, especially if they're different across the template and across the site, I think that makes all the difference in the world, not just for getting
100%.
buy-in, but for getting value at the end of the day.
Less like everyone who does SEO audits, like, listen up. And I can't tell you how many dev teams and companies at the end of the day, they get these really, really elaborate SEO audit reports and they get overwhelmed and they have no idea what to do. And the SEOs that are the middlemen have no way to give them the guidance. And so that's not helpful. That's not the way to get things implemented and get them approved. Like, you really need to understand how things work. Like Loren said, to be able to diagnose exactly what's happening and give the devs, don't assume that they're going to be able to figure this out. Their minds don't think that way. They just don't. They don't see things that we see from a technical SEO standpoint. So have to be able to work with them and lay down the foundation. And then probably one of my best favorite tools is when I started to learn to use WP command line, and I use it every day. It's fantastic. So you have to learn how to, work in a terminal and use SSH commands, and it can be scary to some. If you're working with a company, hopefully they have a a staging environment that you can test in and play in first. But when we're talking about mass updating of redirects that were incorrect or links or URLs, maybe we have pages that we've like deleted off the site, but we have a ton of internal links still pointing to those pages that are either going through redirects or they're 404, even worse.
Mhm.
It is so easy to go in and utilize WP command line and do like one URL in like tens. Well, it depends on how big your database is, but for you, it is super quick, and then it just runs, and it's fantastic, and it does it all for you. It's way more effective to do things there, even than going into the database and running a database query or using a search and replace plugin in WordPress, which I know a lot of people do as well. But
Mhm.
those miss things quite frequently. I'm sure a lot of you, when we went through the changing to every site to secured, and we had a lot of, unsecured links that were left randomly across sites. That was why a lot of those get missed. And so, that's an easy query to run and clean up and make sure you've got everything. And I even do that like on an older site that's been linking out to other sites for years. I'll clean up the outbound links because they were pointed to the non-secured version of those sites. So
Yep.
I don't know. That's just
Yep.
my OCD.
No, I love that too. I also, it's better to identify that and give a solution other than also just identifying it, because I've found that a number of developers will just be like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll just redirect that to the homepage." Right?
Right.
It's like, no, don't do that. No, that's the last thing we need. So WP command line, that's wp-cli.org, right? I want
Yes.
to just make sure before I
So
drop that in here.
if you that's like one of my major requirements when I'm looking for a web host, is that hopefully they already have it installed or they will let you install it. It's installed at the command line.
Mhm.
At the VIP level, you can actually install a client locally on your own computer that works directly with the VIP command line, they call it. And it's so handy. There's so many different things I do, and I can pull reports. If I want to get a list of all the posts that are tagged with a certain tag, or if I want to see a list of all the reports or pages and posts and all the stats that goes along with it in a category, I can easily export that for
Oh,
someone.
nice.
We recently just had to do a lot of link cleanup, and the internal teams were like panicking because basically they thought editorial was going to have to go in and edit by hand all these pages. And I'm like, guess what? I'm your best
I
friend
got you
because I
covered.
can do that at scale, super fast. And like, I can't even tell you how excited they were to hear that we have this functionality. And so for me now, it's getting more internal team members trained to utilize it as well. And then hopefully get cleanup and not have to do it, as often, but get it done and get those processes in place so that we get them frequently cleaned up. But yeah, it's exciting. You just never know. It's you might change a permalink structure and of a category, and you have to change all the URLs that had that category in them. That's a quick and easy way to do it all in one swoop. So it's very
Very
exciting.
cool. Very
Yes.
cool. We have a lot of people excited in the comments about
Yeah.
WP command line as well. Kim, just to let you know, we'll drop that in the LinkedIn chat. So you have it. And we did have one question. We're almost out of time, Shelly. I can't believe it's
Oh,
almost been an hour.
no way.
I know, right?
I
So
could chat
we do
all day long.
we do have a question from Karapetsky. Karapetsy asks, do you have any recommended resources on where to start learning specialized WordPress SEO?
Ooh,
Course or anything like that?
that's a good question. Okay, so for me, I've mostly learned by doing and playing. I really think that's your best lesson, but I know there's some really good. Um, Let me see if I can't remember the name of that site, but they do have some.
And by the way, I'm just going to drop a link to our WordPress SEO guide
Ha, ha,
and
ha.
ebook
I should
here
have
in the
known we
chat
had
as
one.
well.
That's right. I was supposed to contribute to that, but I think my workload did not let me do that. Let me see courses. I would focus. So a lot of you obviously probably have a good understanding of SEO as well. Um,
Mhm.
there's I would focus on courses that were like teaching about like junior WordPress development staging. Um, on the development side rather than looking for something that's a WordPress SEO. Um, just because I think there's just so much more value in understanding. You don't have to be able to like be able to build a complex plugin or anything like that. You just need to understand how pages are built and put together and be able to look at a theme and be able to understand how this one works versus that one, because like I said, they're all different. And even like someone who gets in with the same foundation,
Mhm.
they get in and get customized and tweaked, and then they're still totally different than, the Beaver Builder theme framework, that someone used on this site. So you get a lot of people will be like, oh, but this site's really slow, but this one's really fast. It's all about what you put into those pages as well and the customization. So I think understanding that is really the most valuable tool that you can give yourself for professionally and just personally. I love it. It's fun.
Very cool. Very cool. So before we sign off, I think you touched upon this a little bit, but and you just did a little bit with command line. But what do you look for in a web hosting provider with
Right.
WordPress, especially not just a personal blog, but something that may scale like on the enterprise side or a larger publication or something like that? Like what are your typical things that you look for when deciding on which hosting provider to utilize?
That's a good question. So one, I love a web host that gives me flexibility, so I can have root access and to be able to install things on the server side that I need to, but then also has support. I think is key. Integrations, there's some really good ones. Like WP Engine, of course, has probably one of the best support teams out there. They're constantly working to make, their platform fast, and they're integrating
Mhm.
some really cool features. Their staging and production environments are fantastic, and the integration with GitHub and allowing you to work if you're working in an agile environment is fantastic. You want to have a web host that does that, that'll have command line hopefully installed, that has some security features in place, and definitely a backup system. And hopefully that's included in your plan. If you're paying for a lot, hopefully at least you have some sort of backups that are included. Don't assume, and then your site
Yeah.
gets hacked and you have no way to restore. So I feel like that's really important. Don't be afraid to invest in your hosting. It is like your foundation of your site. It is so critical, and they are going to be your best friends if something ever happens to your site, especially if you do not have a big internal team, to help you, or any team at all. You really need that support from a good web host. So there's a lot of good. If you want other recommendations, I really bad at names. I know Kinista is really good. Let's see. Can't really think of some of the other ones off the top of my head, but been one of those days. I've been sick all week,
Yeah.
but
No problem.
yeah, but just super excited, and pay attention to what Automatic is doing. I just
Mhm.
did a demo the other day. They bought this brand called Parsley, and or Parsley, or I don't even know how it's pronounced. It's the coolest like content insights and analytics that you could
Oh,
possibly want. If you generate, build your content generating machine, you're really going to want to have the insights. It's just really cool. So I'm excited to hopefully get to demo it with our own content within our own site eventually. But yeah, they're doing some really cool things in the space. So I'm excited to see what the future holds. I think WordPress has not stopped growing, and they're definitely going to be around for a long time. So it's
you
worthwhile to
say
invest your time.
parsley or
Yes, it
parsley?
is. It's PARSE.ly.
Okay.
And I believe maybe, because now I'm looking at their logo and it says part of WordPress VIP. So this might just be available on the VIP side. I think before maybe it might have been available a
Yeah, I'm
little
checking it out
bit.
right now. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Oh
got
yeah,
some
content
pretty darn.
analytics for enterprise. Got you. Yeah, on the VIP side. Yeah, VentureBeat did a nice write up. I'll drop a link.
Yes, so cool. So yeah, there's just a really cool ecosystem in WordPress, and the community, you really cannot beat it. So I'm all for it. I find it rare that there's a situation that WordPress really couldn't handle
Mhm.
when done right. For developers that work like with their Rust API, like you can, so extendable. It really truly is. So
Hey Shelly, do you like WordPress?
I do. I love
Okay.
WordPress.
All
No,
right.
I do.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm a big WordPress fan too. Like we've been on SEJ has been on WordPress for I think 2 years after launching. I think I was on Blogspot for a couple of years,
Oh
and then
yeah.
like someone's like, "Hey, you want to test out this new blogging platform?" And I think it was called B2 at the time, or some spinoff of WordPress. I can't remember, but ended up getting in, and yeah, just been a fan ever since. Thank you so much for joining today. It's really been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
connecting, learning more on the importance of just understanding WordPress development as a whole, et cetera, from the SEO side, working with development teams and getting better tips from you than, hey, take them out to dinner, right? Like really working with a development team as opposed to manipulating or working against the
Right.
development
They
team. So
are
that's
your
been
partners, though.
very
Treat them
valuable.
as such. Yes.
Exactly. So where can we find you online?
Um, Good question. Probably Twitter is the best place. Since I've went in-house, I'm not as active just because I'm just so busy. But I try to be a little bit more. So Twitter is probably the best place. LinkedIn, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, just around the sphere, and then hopefully once some conferences get rolling again, we'll be there. Shout out to all my friends at PubCon in Vegas today.
Yeah, I know, right?
I know I've got major FOMO. We would have been there. I would have been there, but literally just moved from Texas to North Carolina. So it was so exhausting, and then I got sick, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to Vegas. I guess the worst place when you're exhausted and sick, that's probably
Uh,
the worst, the last place you want to go.
exactly.
So yeah, shout out to our friends at PubCon. I think they're in the Golden Nugget right now or something like that, hanging out.
Yes.
So that's good to see things kind of firing up again. And then are you doing something with DMO later in the
I
year?
am, yes.
Mhm.
Well, early next spring, I think. So, I'll be their MC. So I get
Oh,
the coolest gig, in Napa. So very exciting because I've actually never been to Napa, or I've never been to the conference there. I've actually been to Napa when I was a
mhm.
child. So it's been a while. I couldn't drink wine when I was there before. So yes, very
It's kind of
excited.
cool to kind of get away from everything. Like I like the whole like if especially like post pandemic, if you're going to meet up with people, like let's meet up on the countryside, at a
Right.
winery somewhere
That
away from everyone. So that's cool.
sounds
And I think it's just a good
wonderful.
environment regardless. So Shelly,
I
it's been a
agree.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Always
much
a
for jumping
pleasure.
on today. Yeah. And
You're
thank you to our
welcome.
sponsors, Adzuma and SEMrush, for making today's show possible. So I dropped your Twitter handle in here, Shelly, so folks can connect with you there, along with your
Fantastic.
LinkedIn
Yes.
and everything
And
else. And how long you've been in Credit Karma now?
I'm 2 months in, so
Oh wow.
pretty darn new. Yeah. And I am going to be doing a SEMrush webinar, I think, coming up in December with some cool people. I did not mention, but I'm a SEMrush brand ambassador and a huge SEMrush tool user, if you did
Yeah.
not already know. So, yes, big supporter. So excited to see them as a sponsor today.
Yeah, I think I woke up on Monday or Tuesday morning to check my rankings in SEMrush, and I saw all of the new search intent
I
add-ons for
love
each
that.
keyword, which is super cool.
So cool. That was brilliant. So brilliant. They have some pretty amazing developers that work on those product teams. And honestly, if you guys have ideas, I will send them straight to those teams. They are
Oh,
fantastic about implementing ideas. So there's pretty much nothing they can't do. So happy to pass along some good ideas, or join the Facebook group, the SEMrush All Stars, that I had an original hand in building once upon a time. So they're
it is
fantastic as well.
it is a great group. My only recommendation is I really want the ability to just like do a mass Excel download of all of the issues into like
Right.
one spreadsheet with everything tabbed out, so then I can whittle it down from there.
That would be nice
But
too.
yeah, that
Yeah.
would be nice, right? But yeah, it's a really cool tool. So thanks to SEMrush. And I feel Adzuma, I hope you guys don't feel
Yes.
left out, but we really love
No,
Adzuma.
I'm gonna
Nava is
try
there
out
now.
Azuma.
Yeah. So great team, great people, great solution. All right. So we gotta get rolling. It's been like an hour. We've been on for
I
like an
know.
hour and 5
We
minutes already,
always get
Shelly.
up. We always chat like forever. So I enjoy our
Mhm.
chats, Loren.
Well, it's great to catch up, and thank you so much for sharing your experience in um, the WordPress community, the WordPress ecosystem, WordPress environment with all of our viewers and listeners today. Really appreciate that. And looking forward to seeing what you're doing over at Credit Karma Intuit in the future. So
Yes.
again, thanks again for joining.
And
And thanks to everyone for listening and
thank
watching
you.
today on the SEJ show. It's been
Have a
Shelly
good day.
Fagin and Loren Baker. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.